Dreams can be a strange occurrence. They can be a glimpse into one's own madness, or it can be a delve into one's own hopes and happiness. For our would-be warrior of light's case, it was neither. It was simply strange. Was it a dream at all, even? At first, she was drifting into a seemingly endless sea of ether, only to be met by a voice calling out to hear, feel, and think. In the midst of trying to figure out what that meant, she was met with an intimidating dark-robed figure, and as if a natural response, she would don an armor of light, going so far as to wield a blade of light, and then engage in combat with this dark being. But before the results of that battle can be shown, she woke up. Before she could even have a chance to think about that dream, she realized she was still on the same boring caravan when she first left their village. That same boring caravan holding two young elven twins that were doing a wonderful job at pretending no one existed. That same boring caravan that had a mouthy merchant who was desperately in need to be acknowledged. Effectively trapped on this boring caravan, she decided to indulge the merchant, if only to pass the time. Yet it only took a short moment before something strange happened. These fluffy and precious creatures floated from seemingly out of nowhere to cause some mischief, only to be shocked that they were easily spotted by our foreign girl. These fluffy pillows, Muggles as they call themselves, had this special trait where they cannot be seen or heard from normal people. Seen as how she can, however, she was immediately called special for this reason alone. She paid no mind to this as the Muggles harmlessly floated away. The merchant, none the wiser, continued his conversation with her. But there was a problem. Our main character was a silent protagonist. She's never been one to fully speak her mind, but there are times her silence got so bad, her peers have mistaken her for being mute. Our merchant friend, however, did not seem to mind this. Turns out he was excellent at exposition, and an ironic faction, our warrior of light was an excellent listener. Fortunately, she learned much from him, mainly that the Black Shroud was a dangerous place, full of exotic beastmen and dangerous creatures. It would do well for her to establish herself in Gridania before doing any sort of adventuring, unless she had a death wish. Entering into Gridania led her to be easily spotted by the guards as her outfit screamed foreigner. Fortunately, she wasn't turned away, and after learning of her aspiration to become an adventurer, she was directed to the aptly named Adventurers Guild. From there, she was introduced to Mother Mione, who would take charge of this budding sprout and watching her grow, or wither away like so many before her. When asked for her name, she parted her lips for the first time since her arrival, Tanaya Makers. However, she would be named a sprout to everyone else around her for now. Thus, the sprout was sent out to establish herself around Gridania. She went to her guild to get acquainted to its guildmaster, Isumi Yan. Noting the horns on his head, he was easily recognizable as a Pajal, who are essentially an extension of the 12th Wood itself, capable of hearing the voice of the elementals. That in mind, he promptly sent the sprout to wreak havoc on the wildlife at the outskirts of the city-state. According to him, it was the will of the forest, as the wildlife was too cumbersome. This made her think what would happen if humanity itself was seen as cumbersome, but figured that would have been an inappropriate question. So after satisfying the guildmaster's bloodlust, the sprout returned to Mother, who congratulated her for doing her chores, and then promptly sent her out to do another one. This led to her going to the Bannock training grounds, who provided an inspection of her equipment. Passing that exam, she was given a surprisingly sensitive task to investigate the activity of the Exali. Arriving at the given location showed a bizarre sight of a dead Exali and a sword in a stump. Very shortly after, she was met by a fluffy Moogle with two accompanying companions, a male Lalafell and a female Here. While they first looked at the sprout with suspicion, that was quickly dashed away when the force got royally pissed that no one took the sword out of a stump and decided to go on a rampage by sending forest monsters to the group. For a moment, the Sprout began to reassess her opinion of her bloodthirsty guildmaster, but halted that thought to team up with the duo to pacify the forest. After the battle ended, the Sprout spotted a crystal, seemingly out of nowhere. Picking it up triggered something strange, a sort of merging with its essence within her own soul. Light washed over her as a radiance flowed inside her body. Then, without realizing it, she fell into another dream. All she could grasp onto was a voice. That same voice that told her to hear, feel, think. Hydaelyn, the Mother Crystal, called to her. She speaks of an ill omen and a desire, or rather, a need, for this Sprout to go on a journey. She must find the crystals of light in order to expel the rising darkness and restore the light to the realm. Hydaelyn had placed her hopes on this budding adventurer. Waking up once again, she found the duo watching her. She decided to tell them of her dream. While they had no earthly idea what these giant crystals were, they felt she was sane enough to report back to the Banach. Left to herself, she remained confused, and perhaps even scared at the prospect of light versus darkness. Yet she also couldn't help but feel a sense of calmness and assurance of her dream, a sign that she was never alone. While she may not have the answers now, she felt safe placing trust in what could only be a goddess. Returning to the Banach was fortunately uneventful. After her report, it was learned that the Here and Lalafell are called Ida and Papalymo respectively. While both act oddly, they're tried and trusted friends of Gridania. With that clarified, the soldier thanked the Sprout for her help and continued to look into whoever slain the Exali. Soon after that, the Sprout was quickly back to work doing some housekeeping. However, she was immediately thrust back into another strange event. She was sent out on a mission to learn what happened to a party of fellow conjurers and their escort at a jury place called Spirithold. It turned out they were attacked quite viciously by some sort of strange large shadow. After helping the survivors, she encountered what would be the culprit to the party's wounds, a powerful golem. She found this fact perplexing, however, as simply smashing it with earth and wind made it buckle and crumble to her feet. As if taking the words out of her mouth, she heard the golem's master exclaim with such shock and fervor of her power. Before she could confront the dark being, it made a clean getaway. Ida and Papalymo soon arrived after these events, cursing their luck for missing the mastermind behind these sudden events. Then, almost at random, an intense vision unfolded once more, except this time, the Sprout was without a body, instead seeming to be an astral projection, silently watching the events of Ida and Papalymo unfold. While it was hard to grasp the details, the Sprout now understands that these two Charlayans can be trusted. With that in mind, she left the investigating to the duo while she departed to make her report to the Banach, which led her to make a return to Mother Mion. After the report, Mother forbade the Sprout from speaking of this to any other soul, and left the matter to people of higher understanding. Instead, Mother bid her to take advantage of the guild's functions to rest and prepare for the next adventures. She thankfully takes the much needed rest. It had only been a couple of days since what was meant to be her humble beginnings. Yet she nearly died to the forest itself, only to dust off a monster that defeated a party of conjurers that were surely more experienced than her. Where did this sudden surge of power come from? As if to answer, her mind drifted towards the crystal of light. Was that the source? Did it truly bring her to heights that she had only dreamed of? Such speculation, however, had to remain as that. When the next day arrived, It was a relief to her that the adventures consisted of more housekeeping. While mundane, the people of the Twelveswood grew more and more trustful of this budding adventurer. She was even entrusted with the most sensitive task of it all: saving a chocobo egg. However, there had been sightings of a masked mage in black garb, and it had remained in the back of the Sprout's mind. The mundane work came to an end when a sudden increase of XIV activity prompted the residents to send her back to Mother with a message. After heeding this message, Mother instructed the Sprout to prepare for a mission of grave importance. The XIV planned on destroying the Guardian Tree, the oldest tree in the forest. Destruction of this tree would cause a wrath of the elementals far beyond what the Sprout faced previously. It was imperative that they were stopped before it was too late. After relaying this message to both Lord Lewin, he made it top priority. But not a second later, it was reported that the XIV were already amassing at the Guardian Tree. With no time to muster a full counterplan, Lewin asked the Sprout on the defense of the Guardian Tree. Realizing she was once again plunged into a dire situation, she silently accepted. Upon reaching the Guardian Tree, the battle began almost immediately. It was a long and arduous one, full of bodies dropping into the lake on both sides. However, the Gridanians came out on top. They hastily moved on to rid of even more XIV, while the Sprout held the current position. During this, she sensed a foreboding will. The masked mage finally made an appearance, with the focus on the adventurer herself. She had been deemed a problem, and she must be killed. Quick to arm herself, she went into battle, only to quickly find that this masked mage was well beyond the power of what she could handle. To top it off, he even had a pet monster to stick at her. After what felt like a desperate struggle to survive, she was ceremoniously saved by the dynamic entry of Ida and Papalima. Together, they ended the threat of the masked mage, as the life was snuffed out of him. After these events, Ida and Papalima finally properly introduced themselves, despite already knowing a lot about them thanks to the Sprout's indescribable vision. Though there was confusion on her knowing more than she should, they made mention of the masked mage's appearance, noting that he was likely part of a group called the Asians. With that nugget of information, they left to allow the adventurer to confirm her mission was complete back in Gridania. But before she took her leave, she spotted another crystal. But she could tell this one was not a crystal of light, but of darkness. Approaching this crystal caused it to erode, as if her very presence was too much to bear. Watching the ether harmlessly float away, all she could do was sigh in content, knowing that a piece of darkness had been banished.